So consciousness and awareness are really quite key for coaching. So the consciousness bit is about being conscious of what you're doing, why you're there, what kind of things might be influencing the coaching. It's about really thinking about what you're trying to help facilitate in the client. So it's mostly about what we want to facilitate in the client is them accessing their own inner wisdom, their own invisible coach. And so the consciousness comes from being kind of making deliberate choices about what you're doing and understanding why you might be doing what you're doing in the coaching, which is all in the interest of helping the client with their learning. The awareness is kind of about awareness of what's going on around you, what's going on between you, what's going on within you, because all of these things will be influencing, impacting, and maybe being affected by the coaching. So the awareness is about understanding what might be going on for the coach, the sorts of things that might be impacting and influencing on the coach, and which may not be in the best interest for the client. So things like the things that might be impacting are the things that make us the person that we are, the things that influenced us growing up to become the person that we are will be there in the coaching. We can't put aside who we are while we're coaching. So it's being aware of those kind of things, because some of those things will be helpful in the coaching, but some of them won't be so helpful. That won't be so helpful in terms of where the client, what's happening for the client and where the client goes with the coaching. So it's being aware that that these things may be present, and sometimes we might need some external help in understanding those things. So maybe another coach or a supervisor will help you to understand the things that are impacting on the coaching. And the idea is to kind of minimise the unconscious influence, and it's impossible to actually remove it completely, but as we become more aware of the things that can potentially impact us while we're coaching, we can reduce the influence of them. So in my book I talk about 4 modes of presence, and this is just a way of thinking about how you are being with the client, which is paradoxical because your presence is actually something you don't want to be thinking about, but for people who are developing their coaching skills, this gives a way of thinking about it to develop the skills, which then hopefully will embed within them, and then they don't have to think about it. So these 4 modes are different ways of being with the client, but they are linked very much to what you're trying to help the client facilitate in the client. So the way that I look at it is there are 4 levels of awareness, which I mention in the book about the levels of awareness that the client has at the moment and what you're trying to facilitate. So each of the modes correlate broadly to each of the 4 levels. So there are some aspects, if you talk about level 1 awareness, it's about what the client knows. They can talk about it relatively easily. It's something that is kind of right in front of their eyes, so to speak. So they know this. The second level is still information that they know and they're aware of, but probably have to think about it a little bit more. They need a bit of prompting to find this other information that is actually still fairly readily available to them. And then you go into the deeper levels, and it's these deeper levels that really then enable a transformation in the client. So when we're talking about the deeper levels, the level 3 awareness is around what the client knows but maybe has forgotten a bit about, or that they are consciously avoiding. Sometimes we avoid an element of something that we could potentially learn from, we avoid it. And then the bottom level is that level where either they don't know or they are unconsciously avoiding things. So part of your being is about enabling this learning to come through and to drop into those lower levels, because that's where the learning really comes from in the coaching. So the 4 modes are about bringing out those levels of awareness. So the first mode, which is invisible coach mode. And I want to make a point about the invisible coach mode. Invisible coach mode is not about the coach being invisible. the coach will always be there. You can't be invisible as a coach. Just being there makes a difference to the coaching relationship. Invisible coach mode is about drawing out that invisible coach that is within the client so that they can use that then going forward without you. The idea is that the client can be independent, the independent thinkers, without me being there as the coach. So that first mode is invisible coach mode. It's about enabling the client to access their own inner wisdom. So this is mostly about the coach just being there, paying attention, listening, allowing the client to talk about all the things that they want to talk about. They take it off in the directions that they want to talk, and the coach is basically just enabling that continuation of their own thinking. So that's the invisible coach mode. So the next mode is emergent coach mode. So this is where there is more of the coach in the relationship. If you think about the cat in Alice in Wonderland, you know, the Cheshire Cat, at first you only see a bit of a shadow, then you see the face, the smile coming through in the face. So it's, the coach is emerging a bit more, it's a bit more visible in the coaching relationship. So in emergent coach mode, you are offering the client different ways of thinking about the topic based on your own knowledge, your own awareness of tools and techniques pretty much. You're still not allowing things like judgments, knowledge, solutions, all that kind of thing to come into the coaching. So you're just offering them a tool as a way of understanding the situation. So they're still going into they're moving into their level 2 awareness. Some of the peripheral information that they didn't realise that they know but is still readily accessible. And then we go into evident coach mode. So evident coach mode is there is more of the coach themselves in the coaching. So what we're doing is we're offering elements of myself as the coach. So this could be some knowledge that I have, it might be a piece of information that I have. It's not solutions, it's not suggestions. But it also could be those feelings that I'm getting, those images that are popping into my head, some academic model that I'm aware of, that if the client knew a bit more about it, they would look at the situation in a slightly different way. And then finally you have visible coach mode. So this is where the coach is really taking a stand almost in the coaching, pushing the client towards something that potentially they might not be comfortable looking at, kind of directing the coaching in a certain direction because you're aware that there is learning in that for the client. So this is where the consciousness comes into it. You are deliberately choosing the interventions to help the client to get where they need to go. So you have it in mind all the time about what you're trying to facilitate in the client. So the final mode, visible coach mode, we're kind of pushing the client a bit, challenging their thinking, getting them to explore something that they may not have considered exploring before or might have been avoiding or that they don't know. And the 4 modes are interwoven. You don't necessarily go from invisible to emergent to evident to visible, although you can do. But what you do mostly is invisible threads its way through the whole thing. So you might start off with invisible, move to emergent, and then go back to invisible while the client then explores and carries on their thinking. So you might offer them an intervention in one of the other modes and then go back to invisible coach mode to let them carry on their thinking and find their own inner wisdom. So do some reflection on your existing coaching and think about them in the way of the 4 modes and use some of the questions that are in the at the end of each chapter to reflect on that. And then practice each of the modes, which you can practice individually almost. So there are coaching practice forums where people go just to practice coaching, or you might have a friendly coach that you work with, you might have other students that you've done some learning with at some point. So people who you can practice each of the modes individually in order to be able to develop them as a different way of being.